Welcome back to Fresh Outlook. I am your host, Logan Crawford. Folks out in Colorado are honoring a police officer killed in the Planned Parenthood shooting. He was honored for volunteering to help others. He rushed to the clinic as shots rang out. Officer Garrett Swayze leaves behind a wife and 2 young children. He was one of 3 people killed after authorities say the shooter said no more body parts to the police after his surrender, launching a media game based on pro-abortion mantras rather than facts. I am joined by the Fresh Outlook panel of experts, Joe Blaettler, whom you just met, Jackie Guzda, whom you know well, and Sarah Fader, CEO of Stigma Fighters, a first-time guest. Sarah, let me ask you first, what's your take on this tragedy out in Colorado Springs?
Well, I think there's a lot of misconceptions about what it is Planned Parenthood actually does. In the media, abortion and Planned Parenthood are synonymous, whereas Planned Parenthood has a variety of services. And the women that were there that day might not have been there to get an abortion. They might have been there for STD testing or LGBTQ issues or to get an HIV test. I mean, there are so many different things that Planned Parenthood does, and it's a tremendously valuable organization. One of the other things that I'd like to mention is that I'm saddened as someone who has had an abortion that these women were placed in this vulnerable situation where the people that were going to have an abortion were there to get this service performed, and then they had the unfortunate disadvantage of interacting with this violent person.
It's just a nightmare no matter what you're at an office for on any given day when a gunman shows up, no doubt. Jackie, do you feel that these videos that were produced by this Right to Life group, this conservative group, fuels nuts like this person who carried out this attack?
Well, he almost completely quoted Carly Fiorina during the Republican debate. I mean, he used her words. She came on and she said, I hope everybody watches these videos because you will see this baby aborted, legs thrashing, and then they say, we've got to save this one and keep him alive so we can harvest his brain. Well, you know what, Carly? That was not in the video. The video was doctored. It was edited to have a certain point of view, so it looked like Planned Parenthood was selling baby parts, which is illegal, which they weren't. Planned Parenthood takes this fetal tissue and stores it for researchers. And if anybody here has benefited from having vaccines or Parkinson's research, you know what? You've benefited from using fetal tissue because it's been going on since 1930.
Right, and it's a hotly debated topic, and as people like yourselves feel very strongly on the pro-choice side, there's people who legitimately and peacefully are pro-life as well. So we'll get into that just a little bit. I don't want to get bogged down into the issue of abortion. Joe, I'm going to ask you about this case. Is this guy a terrorist? Because he seemed to be driven by some kind of ideology as well.
Yeah, I would definitely classify this guy as a terrorist. He is trying to instill fear in people, and he's trying to change policy. And that's basically a definition of a terrorist. He was a terrorist. I mean, I don't know what influenced him. I don't know who he was listening to. Was he influenced? I don't know these answers. I don't think anybody will ever know. But to me, yes, he was a terrorist. He went there to terrorize people, and he tried to change public policy.
And mental health seems to play a important factor in this as well. He looks like he's deranged from his photograph. Apparently he was living in a trailer in the outskirts of town with a woman who was obsessed with her religion. I know part of your work is to destigmatize mental illness. Tell me how you see mental illness fitting into the equation of that man there you see on TV going into a clinic and killing innocent people.
I feel that when the media focuses on mass shootings, they're very quick to mention mental illness. And in reality, there are so many other factors at play here. For example, I myself live with panic disorder, which according to the DSM-5 is a mental illness. Am I going to go shoot up Planned Parenthood? No. even though.
So it depends on what mental illness you have. This guy apparently was a substance abuser. It seemed like there were a lot of discarded vodka bottles in his trailer.
Sure.
He was living in disarray. Like I said, his general appearance to a layperson seems to indicate some kind of perhaps schizophrenia.
I'd be careful about using schizophrenia as a diagnosis here because as far as I know, nobody on this panel has a degree in psychology. So I feel that he was probably a sociopath. And this is a case of domestic terrorism. When you go into a clinic and you kill innocent people, there is something not right with you. There is something fundamentally wrong with you. You are lacking empathy for other human beings. That is sociopathy, and it is not indicative of somebody who has schizophrenia. In fact, that is extremely dangerous to stigmatize people with schizophrenia as being dangerous. Human beings are not.
We've heard most schizophrenics are not dangerous. They might be have delusional issues at times, but they tend not to be.
Yeah, in fact, that is a stigma. Most people that live with schizophrenia, on a whole, tend to be very gentle human beings. The issue would be if they feel threatened.
Gotcha.
When somebody with schizophrenia feels fear, they tend to defend themselves. And I mean, again, that's a mass generalization, but.
Jackie, let's turn to the media portion of this. Apparently, this guy was saying no more body parts. That's been, like you said, Carly Fiorina has made that an issue. Fox News has made that a big issue. Do you feel the media is guilty when they do put on these videos that are produced by independent reporters, such as the gentleman who made this movie? I think his name's O'Keefe.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, because there's so much misinformation out there. I mean, they say things like they use babies' body parts and that they're harvesting their brains and all of this, and that women will commit suicide once they have an abortion, which is not true. You know,
but that's also the media in general. They tend to overblow, overhype, and over-dramatize things.
Right,
I mean, legitimately, some people might have a beef with abortion because of their religious beliefs.
Mm-hmm. Let me tell you something. Yep. On Twitter, after this occurred, there were some vehement pro-life people saying things, and let me quote somebody. I wish that the people getting abortions that day had been killed by the shooter.
Well, sure.
It's sick. I mean, but Twitter is the bathroom wall of the internet where people write all kinds of horrible things. Joe, I'm going to ask you for just a second. How do we stop shooters like this guy? I mean, we talked a little bit about, other types of terrorism, but this domestic type of terrorism, I mean. Again,
it's extremely difficult. In this particular case, steps could have been taken to stop a guy like this. I believe he was involved in domestic violence in the past. He had drinking issues. So those are some indicators there. A person like that should not have a gun. Where he got the gun from, I'm still not sure
and
where
also,
he got it from.
He had been accused of rape.
Yes, he's been accused
of
rape.
And other violent crimes as well. I know an accusation isn't enough to give you a criminal record, but.
But again, clearly in this particular case, this person should not have had a firearm.
What is the government doing to background check people who try to get guns that are in this state, that are domestic abusers, that are violent criminals? Our Congress needs to take action.
Well, Joe could tell you that. It's very difficult to get a concealed carry permit in this state.
Concealed carry permit is almost impossible in the state of New Jersey. In the state of New Jersey, if you have domestic violence history, you cannot get a weapon. But listen,
does that include rifles?
Any weapon.
Any weapon at all.
If a police officer responds to a scene of domestic violence, you're obligated to seize all weapons in the premise. Gotcha. However, it's like everything else. We have laws, but we don't enforce them. There's plenty of cops out there, and this is not negative about cops, but there's plenty of cops out there who are involved in domestic violence incidents, and they get their guns back at some point. I mean, we don't enforce the laws on the books. That's number one. Number two, there's just too many loopholes. I mean, you got to remember when it comes to gun control, every state decides what the law is going to be. It's not a federal issue. It's a state issue.
Should it be a federal issue in your opinion?
I don't think overall, but the federal government should play a role in it. I think there should be federal background checks. I think we should eliminate gun sale loopholes. You go, for example, you go down to Mississippi. I could buy a gun from you. You own a gun, you want to get rid of it, I show up at your house, here's a gun. there's really no record of the transaction. I walk away with a gun and I come back to New Jersey with it. In New Jersey, you're not allowed to do that. If there's a transaction between two people, it has to be registered and documented. I think there's way too many loopholes in allowing people to get guns.
And what role does the NRA play in this?
But look, I've got to go back to what you said about the media. If you looked at something like the Daily News is a conservative paper, and they were shaming Paul Ryan and all these politicians who make our laws by saying your thoughts and your prayers are with them. Well, that's just not enough. Take some action.
But again, like we were talking about in the break, we always in this country, we always make this a Democrat-Republican issue. But yet, like we were talking about on the break, Harry Reid got a B rating from the NRA. He gets a very high rating. The NRA likes Harry Reid. When Harry Reid was the Speaker of the Senate and the Democrats controlled the White House, the Senate, and the Congress, they cannot pass gun control. Why? Because there are Democrats that do not support gun control. So the media and politicians always want to make it look like it's us against them, Republicans versus Democrats. That's not the case.
I think the media is trying to show that it's who is paying these politicians that makes the difference.
Let me just read something that one of our viewers wrote to us regarding the shooting out in Colorado Springs at the Planned Parenthood clinic. Call me pro-life. I'm against abortion. I don't want it to be legal. It allows defenseless babies to be killed. And this man who is writing says, I am the father of an aborted baby. And he had no rights in this matter. So that's the problem with this Planned Parenthood shooting, is the fact that people feel so strongly on both sides, and it's cultural. I mean, I grew up Roman Catholic, and I was told abortion is murder, and often, right to life demonstrations, right to life I think was born out of the Catholic Church, were held in front of abortion clinics.
Are we ignoring the irony here, though?
What's that?
Abortion is murder, but what did this man just do?
Oh, absolutely. That's exactly. It's justifying murder with murder. Absolutely.
Right, exactly.
And that's a key point here.
Oh yeah.
This guy goes in there.
Somebody like myself might vote pro-life.
Right.
But I wouldn't shoot.
He goes into a Planned Parenthood clinic talking about babies, and then he murders people.
You're not pro-life.
It makes no sense. It makes no sense.
Yeah, it
you're
makes
not
no
pro-life.
sense.
You're anti-life.
Pro-life people often tend to be pro-capital punishment as well.
And just to go back to the media for a second.
Sense.
Just to go back to the media for a second. If you ask most people in this country about Planned Parenthood, they all believe the same thing, like you said.
It's an abortion.
It's just an abortion clinic, and that's not true.
Yeah.
That is not true. Planned Parenthood does far more than abortions. It's like, we talked about it earlier. You have to separate the terrorism issue from the gun control issue. Same thing. When it comes to Planned Parenthood, you have to separate the abortion issue from the overall goal of Planned Parenthood. And the media does a horrible job of explaining it.
Absolutely.
Even the Democrats, Republicans, the right wing, the left wing, they only mention Planned Parenthood with abortion. That's it. They don't talk about anything else.
Well, nuance doesn't work well on TV.
Right. So the average person, whether you're pro-choice, pro-life, all they do is associate Planned Parenthood with abortions, nothing else.
Because there is so much misinformation.
Exactly.
And
Some of that misinformation comes from political candidates as well. Talk to me a little bit about the 2016 race, some of the voices you're hearing that aren't voices of reason. This tends to be very polarized. The right tends to appeal to the right to life people because that's their base, and the left tends to appeal to the pro-choice people because that's their base, and the folks in the middle who perhaps just leave it up to the mom to decide are left wondering what to do.
Yeah, well, these people who are in the middle at least have some information. When I look at pro-choice literature or TV shows or whatever, I see people who are looking at the details. They separate a pregnancy into 3 trimesters. First trimester, I'm sorry, it's not a baby. There was a anti-abortion group who, for Halloween, was giving out little dolls, and this is what you're aborting. No, you're not. You're not. It is underdeveloped at the time, And so you have to consider that. I mean,
but the thing is, you're never going to convince. With people's minds are so firmly set on this,
but
you're never going to
Logan,
convince them.
if the messages, if the images were not these fat, chubby babies that are playing in the flowers and all that. I mean, if they saw that little embryo, if they considered the fact that in vitro fertilization, they throw away thousands of fertilized eggs.
And trust me, that gets people very angry as well. If we could settle this problem right here and now, I would win the Nobel Peace Prize, but I cannot. Joe, Jackie, Sarah, thanks for joining us. When we come back, we're going to take a look at what the world leaders are focusing on. It could be a potential killer, our changing climate. More on that after this.